This session is called Why I Chose to Publish OER, What I Learned, and Do I Have Regrets? The buzz about OER, Open Educational Resources, seems to be getting louder. In a recent study by Insight Higher Education, 70% of faculty agreed or strongly agreed that colleges should embrace open educational resources. But mainstream authors have some questions about OER. Because the materials are free to students, does that mean that authors get no remuneration? And will the OER trend drastically reduce sales of commercial textbooks and corresponding author royalties? And who would want to write OER anyway? So Dave Dillon, one of the presenters in this session, has curated, co-authored, and edited 3 college success OER textbooks with the publisher Rebus Community. Dave is currently a general counselor and teaches college success courses at Grossmont College in San Diego. He's a member of the counseling faculty and a I had a duplicate there. Dave's co-presenter is Jean Hoover, a scholarly communications librarian at East Carolina University. And during the past year, she participated in Spark's Open Education Leadership Program. Jean has some interesting perspectives based on her efforts to coordinate ECU's mini-grant textbook affordability program and campus statewide training on OER for faculty and librarians. So I'm sure you'll all appreciate these firsthand insights into the open educational resources trend. And Dave and Jean have asked that you hold your questions for the end of the session. Well, they'll reserve some time for us to all chat with them about it.
Thank you so much, June. Good morning. I'm Dave. My greatest fear is an empty room, especially with a controversial topic, so I really appreciate your being here. Let me first say that I believe that authors should be compensated for their work. And that's the truth. I realize that this next portion may sound contradictory to that, and I may contradict myself, and that's partially because I find myself in a strange space of sometimes feeling like I'm on one side of things and sometimes feeling like I'm on another. And so this diagram shows that. I think I want to be a good steward of TAA. This organization, as I was saying yesterday, means so much to me. It's been so valuable to me, and I have such respect for the conference, for the organization, for the people, for mentors that have welcomed me and guided me here. Robert, you're a prime example of someone that I so don't want to disappoint by going in an alternative path. So, I say that up front because I do feel in that middle part, and I don't find a whole lot of other textbook authors that are associated with TAA that are thinking about or going towards OER. So it's been an internal conflict for me to try to figure out, what are the values, what are the choices, what are the right moves to make. And while I spend most of my time back in San Diego in this OER field, I come back to TAA, and even I have the kind of thought, what am I doing? Why am I giving it away? Because we're supposed to be banding together for authors' rights, and so that you'll see that internal conflict in part of the talk. I'm going to start at the very beginning to try to give you some background of how some of the choices and decisions and circumstances led up to some of those decisions. In California, it's a common term to say freeway flyer. This is an adjunct or a part-timer that's working in multiple districts because you get to the maximum amount that you can work in a certain district. So I was working one semester in 4 different districts, and I had a very naive understanding of copyright restrictions. But even then, I knew that if I was teaching at this college and they assigned this particular textbook, and then I was teaching at another college and they had me pick from a list, and then at a third college I got to pick whatever I want. One, I was just trying to make sure I brought the right textbook to the right class on the right day. But two, I knew that there were going to be issues if I found that I wanted to use this content from this textbook over here. And I was certainly not going to force the students to purchase this secondary textbook, even if I thought that was the best thing, when over here I really wish that I could have, because I thought that was the best learning situation for the students. So my thought was, if I ever get to be full-time, I'm just going to write my own, because I have enough experience from these different areas to be able to put it together. I was fortunate to be hired full-time Grossmont College in 2007, and my goal was to write a study skills and time management textbook for a one-unit class that I was teaching, and I gave myself 2 years. The reality was that it took 5 years, and it's not lost on me how much work went into that, goes into writing a textbook. I did have 2 publishing offers within that time frame, and I think about those often, and I often wonder, did I make the right choice here? The first offer was prior to my finding TAA, and I distinctly remember thinking, they're giving me a contract, this is the greatest day ever, and I'm going to sign it, and I better sign it quickly before, you know, they take that away. And then I read the contract, and there were some things that I wasn't sure about, and really wish that I would have known Steve Gillen, you know, back then. But the end of that was that I just didn't feel like it was the right fit. I didn't feel like they were going to take care of me, or didn't have the same vision for what I was trying to accomplish. So I passed on that, and wondered if another offer was ever going to come again, which one did later after I had found TA. So this time I was more prepared for it. It was, I would say, a better offer from a royalty standpoint. They I think, understood me better. But I was conflicted because there were already 2 texts in this publisher's lineup in my genre. And when I started to ask questions about how they were going to market my project, there was some blinking and some blank stares, and they really couldn't answer that. And so I had also heard some stories from other authors about publishers who killed off projects, for lack of a better term, in order to pave the way for less competition for their prime books. And I was very concerned about that. And it didn't give me confidence that they weren't answering the questions about how they were going to market, you know, my project. So for the second time, I passed on that as well. And I kind of thought, at that point in time, let's see, the first offer, I had 1 chapter in a table of contents. The second offer, it was closer. It was almost a full project and needed to go through some editing and peer review, but it was closer to getting there. So again, I felt like I left money on the table, which somebody asked me yesterday, are you independently wealthy? You know, no, that's certainly not the case. And I didn't make that decision lightly. And I still wonder, you know, maybe I should have went that way. It felt like the right thing to do, to continue with the project and try to finish it, and then, you know, see what was going to happen next. So a colleague of mine had informed me about a university press on the San Diego State campus, Montezuma Publishing. They're a nonprofit. They were able to do the formatting and the binding for me, and we collaborated on setting a price. Again, this is for a 1-unit class text. It was about 100 pages. So 29 roughly translates to $90 if you're looking at comparison for a 3-unit class. I was elated, even though there wasn't the, say, bells and whistles of a larger publisher. My primary goal was to be able to have something that was published and be able to use it in my classes and get a royalty, and that was hitting, all of those. So I was very pleased. Traditional copyright. Now I'm going to lead you through really the 6 things that led me to OER. So one is textbook prices, and if you were at June's session yesterday, she dispelled some myths that I have been, putting out there with textbook prices, and so I think there's a bit of an agenda from whichever side you may be trying to make your point for. Do I think that the cost of a textbook is legitimate? I do. I understand all the things that need to go into a textbook, and a lot of those things cost money. Permissions and editors and authors and publishers and all of that. So I'm not making the argument that it's this cost that's going somewhere that shouldn't be going somewhere. Now, that being said, I also think that textbook prices have gotten higher recently. And while June made it clear that that has leveled off in the last couple of years, it has what I would call skyrocketed more recently, say in the last decade. And so I'm cognizant of that. I don't want to spend a lot of time with student loan debt, and let me address this before I forget. The commentary about the cost of textbooks causing students to be homeless, I think that's ludicrous. Now, I think that homelessness is a problem. I think it's a serious problem, and I think it needs to be addressed. But to say that the cause of that is textbook prices, that was the first time I had seen that one. So student loan debt, do I think that is attributed solely to textbook prices? Absolutely not. But any cost that a student has is a contributor. Okay. Here's the homelessness one. So this was a survey of 33,000 students at 70 community colleges, 24 states by the Association of Community College Trustees. And I tried to find exactly what the criteria was when they were asking questions about how they came up with these categories. It's not easy to find. So I'm not convinced that these statistics are more than that shock value of alarm that's out there. And the OER folks use this as information to try to get instructors to be more sensitive to the costs that students have, and that is going towards their agenda. I will say that the homelessness one, for what I've seen, is fairly accurate. The California State Universities came out with a study, and it was 1 in 10 were identified with food or housing insecurity. So it's something, as a counselor, seeing students in my office all the time as an instructor that I'm sensitive to, and I teach in a lower socioeconomic area, so it hits harder sometimes there. So I want to take a few things that June had mentioned yesterday in her report session. Textbook publisher profits are down. Authors need to adapt to changes as companies try new strategies. June's words. Students are spending less, a variety of different reasons why they're not purchasing as much as they used to. Author royalties are down. Perceived burden for students. And that's my conclusion to whatever anyone's opinion of what the textbook prices are. They're too high. They're what they should be. Whatever that is, the perceived burden for students is important to address as well. And so this is my 5th TAA conference. I've attended June session every single time. I love the reports from the publisher year to year, and I always walk out of June session thinking, oh my gosh, the industry is it's going in the wrong direction. I wish I would have been a textbook author in the 70s, 80s, 90s, because there weren't these bankruptcies, mergers, subscription models. I don't know how to navigate going forward. I think that's a fairly common feeling. Nobody knows exactly what this industry is going to look like 10 years from now. So I think June's right on. Authors need to adapt to changes as companies try new strategies. And OER may not be the thing for many reasons, but it was something that I wanted to try. So I'm going to keep going with how I got there. Many of you are familiar with open educational resources, essentially open licensed variety of things that permits free use and can be repurposed by others, free to students. Okay, so the next thing that happened was that my bookstore marked up the price of the text that had gotten released less than 1 year by $13, which if you're starting at $29 is really significant. The $29 had included the markup. So that was the suggested price with what we wanted the markup to be, so that the bookstore was already making a margin with that $29. Now, to me, that's absurd. And I was livid because I had spent a lot of time thinking, one, it was a small print run. So the price was already higher than what I wanted it to be. And it was a 1-unit class, so I was trying to keep the cost low. And that was cutting into my royalty, right? So it wasn't like when they marked it up to 42, I was getting a greater royalty because the contract was the same. So I was really angry. I'm still angry about that. And my thought was, gosh, if the book was $290 for some of those 500,000 page texts, does that mean that the bookstore would mark it up to $420? Yeah. So that was one piece that started leaning me in that direction. And about the same time, I started to go to other conferences and hear more about OER. I think OER is somewhat misunderstood, maybe not in here, but in general. And what I started to learn was, okay, here's something that I don't know very much about, but I'm interested in learning more. And as more people started to talk about it, I started to have questions. What about quality? What about articulation? What about peer review? What about accessibility? What about sustainability? And in the beginning, it was, OER is not going to solve those. And in some ways, it still hasn't, or hasn't yet. In other ways, I had eventually gotten to a point where I had learned enough information to satisfy some of those questions to continue to lean more in that direction. The next one that was more important to me as an instructor was this first day access, and then more important to me, post-course access. And so this specifically applies to digital access codes. And I think different publishers and different textbooks have different ways on the digital version of giving access to students for a certain amount of time. And for the lawyers here, you may correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that with the digital copyrights, that those cannot be given forever. They have this limited amount of time. And so sometimes that time can be negotiated. It seems to usually be 1 semester, 6 months, 12 months, can be extended, but that's generally what what I've heard. So um, as I started to talk to more students, students would say things like, well, I'm waiting for financial aid to come in, or I'm waiting for my paycheck, and so I can't get the book at the beginning, but in a couple weeks I can get it, when I have money. Well, that was an issue because it's arguably the most critical for the student to have the book at the beginning of the class. And so I was trying to figure out how to solve that issue. And then on the back end, when that digital access code was expiring, if students are taking classes or have any of these needs, it was then causing them to purchase another access code or rent the content again at the end. I would say arguably great for author-publisher to get that secondary purchase, but I didn't feel ethically like that was great for students. I remember I had a student and their parent come in my office, and the student had failed a class, and unbeknownst to them, there was this digital access code. So they just said, how do we renew the digital access code? And I said, my understanding is that you're going to have to purchase again. I'm glad they didn't have a gun, because they were not happy, and I think I would not have been happy in that situation either. Is that the fault of the author or the publisher? Not really, but that's still the reality. Okay, number 5. I went to the bookstore to buy the book, and they didn't have any. Has anyone run into this? Yeah, people are nodding. Okay, so I think I was naive because 10 years in, I didn't really realize that this was a thing. And I feel guilty about it. The truth is that I didn't believe my students. Students would say, I went to the bookstore, they didn't have the book. And I'm thinking, that's not possible. Of course the bookstore has the book. They are the bookstore. That's what they're supposed to do, is have the book so that the student can purchase the book, right? Well, that's your one job. So as some of you know, what I ended up doing, because so many students came to me with this, is that I watched. I went to the bookstore about 4 weeks before, 3 weeks before, 2 weeks before, 1 week before, first day of classes, first week after, second week after. Sure enough, they purposely understock, because oftentimes there's some kind of a contract where they can return a certain percentage to the publisher if they are unsold. So from a business model, I totally get it. If I'm a for-profit bookstore, makes sense. For the mission of the college, for an educator trying to do something right for students, absurd. I mean, is it really that unrealistic that a student should be able to go to the bookstore and buy the book at whatever point in the semester? I don't think that's unreasonable. So again, I think not the fault of the author, not the fault of the publisher. I am sorry to throw my bookstore under the bus, but this was a reality that I was trying to find a solution for, and I was having trouble finding that. And certainly there's students buying direct from the publisher. There's Amazon, there's Chegg, there's other online bookstores. But I kept coming into the issue where some of the students would have a financial aid voucher. It was only able to be used at the bookstore. So it just went back in the circle. Okay, and then number 6. I've been a counselor for 15 years. I've seen tens of thousands of transcripts. It's very rare that I will see a transcript that I haven't seen before. It's something that I'm unfamiliar with. And a student came in about the same time that I was leaning in this direction, and there was something I had never seen before. The student had registered for 5 full-length semester classes, only to drop 3 of them and then re-register for the same 3 classes but different sections in our second 8-week secondary period of the same semester. So the transcript looked really odd because while I had seen that before, I hadn't seen it more than once in the same semester. I mean, the student had 3 classes that were repeating in the same semester. It was very strange. And my thought was, what makes you think that you're going to pass the class in the short term if you didn't think you were going to pass the class in the full term? And you're doing that times 3. And so in the most respectful and delicate way, I said, could you walk me through what you're thinking here so that I understand? And the student said, look, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I can't afford the textbooks. And I thought I could skate by and pass the classes without them. And in these 2 classes, I think I can. But in these 3 classes, I know I can't. So I needed to drop those. But in the class schedule, I saw these other 3 sections of the same classes are taught by different instructors using a different book that's cheaper than the ones that are over here. And now I have a part-time job, and I think I can scrape up enough money to be able to buy the text, of course, if the bookstore was going to have them. So I know that that's in a single student, and I know I'm maybe more sensitive because I'm a counselor. That experience had a visceral reaction for me. I knew it wasn't isolated. I knew it was a larger problem, and I knew I wanted to do something about it, even if that might cost me personally with royalties. So then I was kind of, okay, I'm in. I made one effort to contact OpenStax, which is a large open educational resource publisher, and asked them if they were thinking about doing a college success book. They pay their authors on a flat rate. It's grant funded, and then the books are still free for the student. They weren't working on that project. So I applied for sabbatical leave, and my college granted me approval to be able to put together these 3 OER. This is fall 17. And then I was really all in. I wanted to see what was going to happen. And as I'm standing here talking to you, I still feel like, man, Dave's that crazy guy that did this OER thing. He just jumped off a cliff. And that's kind of what it felt like, because I didn't really know what was going to happen. So I went out and saw some mentors because I needed to know for other people that had done this what exactly to do. And kind of unbeknownst to me, I practiced backward design, which I think you may be familiar with. But this was really different than when I was that adjunct freeway flyer and I was assigned a textbook, because while you have great expertise and you're writing high quality textbooks, they don't always match the course outline for XYZ school at XYZ city and XYZ state. And so for me, I was able to take my own course outlines and match content that directly went towards learning outcomes for that. And I'm really proud of that. I think it's a nice thing to be able to have that match. Easier to do that with articulation for courses that have that. Okay, then I did a lot of research on platforms, and there were 3 OER platforms that I was considering, and Pressbooks was the one. Are any of you familiar with Pressbooks? A couple of you. Pressbooks was the one that I thought was the best fit for me. It allowed me to easily take content and put it into something that was going to have a nice visual display. It met the accessibility requirements, and just easy to use, and had support for people that if I had questions for, they could answer. Pressbooks sits on top of WordPress, for those that are familiar with WordPress, and then it's a nonprofit in Montreal. Their sister company, both grant funded by Hewlett, is the Rebus community. That's the publisher that I went with, and I have had an extraordinary experience with my publisher. There's great communication, there's great trust, there's shared vision, there's consistency. I don't know if I just got lucky or if it's because it's different on the nonprofit side, every single person that has been there from Pressbooks and Rebus has been there the whole time for 3 years. So I'm still working with the same editors, with the same executive director, and you know, again, going back to June's report or talking to other authors where this developmental editor is gone, either laid off or changed positions, that really makes me nervous. I really value that consistency. So that part's been great for me. Next part of the project was surveying existing, already peer-reviewed, and let me make the point that Brenda had referred to OER as the Wild West yesterday, which I think has been the term for a long time. I'm hoping it kind of, you know, phases out. But part of that comes, I think, from anybody can publish anything, which OER probably wouldn't want, you know, out there, but is the truth. So in my opinion, an instructor shouldn't use something, whether it's traditional commercial publisher or whether it's OER, if it's not peer-reviewed. And that's not the be-all, end-all, but I think that's an important piece that should be in that speaks to that quality part. And I surveyed that because with the open licenses, that's something that I could then use. And I'll talk a little bit more about the remix that I created. But it was helpful for me because I was expanding one of the projects from this 1 unit to a much larger 3 unit. The truth is I didn't want to write the whole thing myself if I didn't have to. And I had expertise in certain areas, but there were other areas where I would have really liked to have had something else. So in the traditional publisher, unless you're going to have collaboration or co-author, which I think gets complicated, in the open world, depending on the license, you can take other content and either make it your own or revise it, again, depending on the license. So that was a large part of the sabbatical, was looking at other work that was out there. And really, that was an enjoyable process for me because it was kind of like a buffet. It was, I really like this, I'm going to use that. Nah, I don't like this, so I'm going to leave that. But I like this, and maybe I can mix that with this. So I felt a bit like a chef. And I was mixing it with my own original content, which I had maintained the copyright with Montezuma, so I was able to relicense that as open. It went through an additional peer review. So all of the content that I used was originally peer reviewed, and then when I had it together, it went through another peer review, and I thought that was important because I knew that there was going to be a fair amount of scrutiny going in this open route. It got piloted last spring and then officially released in the summer. Okay, I hope you're not too young to not recognize this audio medium. How many of you, once upon a time, made a mixtape on cassette? Okay, so this is, I think, a better analogy of what the remix is from the music end. Although, if you were like me and you were either putting your cassette into the stereo and punching record, hoping that the radio was going to play the song that you wanted on there, or you had one of those nice dual cassette players and you had a commercial cassette under copyright, and you were illegally recording that onto your cassette, and then you were usually handing that to someone as a gift. That was illegal. The FBI generally didn't come after people because you weren't selling or distributing or, you know, small potatoes for them. But the point is that in the OER world, the mixtape idea is legal, and so it was fun to be able to put together for me. At the most or least restrictive license, you can do any of these things with open content. You can reuse, you can revise, you can remix, you can redistribute, you can retain. Very different from that traditional copyright. As I was getting further along, I was kind of thinking, well, what if somebody takes my content and they do something with it that I'm not sure I want them to do? And eventually I just let go of that. But I think the way that we're usually accustomed to traditional copyright, it takes a while to adjust to this. I'm not going to talk very much about this. All I'm going to say is that what I ended up using was this license, which ended up being the least restrictive for a number of reasons, mostly which had to do with the complications that happen when you try to combine some of the less restrictive licenses. And so with that segue, I'm going to plug a session at 2 o'clock with Danielle and Derek that is a crash course in Creative Commons licensing. I will also say that I'm co-presenting with Al at the same time, so there's also another session that I don't want to go to. Whichever session you want to go. This will be great. Al and I will be great. The other one will be great as well. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is just an example of the license page. This is actually a screenshot of the digital version of the text from the Pressbook site. So it does have traditional copyright, and then sitting over that or under that is the Creative Commons license that states what it allows folks to do. And essentially, it's the attribution that is the important part of this. It's, hey, you can use this and really use it however you like, but please properly attribute to it. I'm also proud to say that through Pressbooks, the student's option for reading are plentiful. So if a student wants to access it on desktop, laptop, tablet, smartphone, really anything that that has the internet, they can read it, and it's got a pretty nice visual display regardless of the screen. The digital version doesn't have pages because the screen sizes are then going to be different, which was an adjustment for me. They can also access on Kindle Nook. They can download a PDF, so if they don't have the internet, they can have it. And then I want to talk a little bit about print options. Print has been a large challenge for OER because it's not free. So in my particular situation, I was able to kind of find two solutions. One is that as much as I would have liked to kind of bypass my bookstore for all those other reasons, they still have the financial aid vouchers. So I couldn't really get away from that. My local printing duplicating was able to put together that 456-page text in black and white for $8.89, and then the bookstore still marked it up, $12.70. Lulu.com, which was here a few years ago at TAA, they do a perfect binding, front and back cover design. It looks nicer, more professional. $8.45, they charge $3.99 shipping. Student gets it for $12.44. That was the best I could do. I'm pleased with that price. Students are pleased with that price. Somewhere around 10 to 15% of the students are opting for print. I still like to feel the book. So they have that option. And I'm a bit surprised that 10 to 15% are going to opt and pay for it, whatever that price is, rather than the free digital. But it I think aesthetically makes me happy that other students are finding value with the print. I don't think print is dead. This is what it looks like in the marketplace. I do want to plug this book. I'm guessing that everyone in the room is familiar with it, but this book by Mary Ellen, Sean, and Stephen, phenomenal. And there's a lot of framework in here that shaped what I put together. So I'm very appreciative for this resource and highly recommend it if you're a new author or a seasoned author and you haven't read it. It's out there in the lobby. Okay, this is a bit counterintuitive, I think. With no royalty, there's really no incentive for me to market, so I thought. All word of mouth, the text has started to become adopted in more places than I thought that it would be. Um, and that has had a positive effect, I think, on me and say my brand. Um, and so I would say keep that in mind a bit. Segueing back into June's advice for what areas can authors think about that might be the next new niche. Ancillaries are what is, in my opinion, where OER is lacking and behind. And it's starting to catch up in some places, but this is where I think that the commercial textbooks still have a huge advantage from a quality perspective. Instructors will contact me and say, hey, Dave, your book is great. I want to use it. What ancillaries do you have? And when the book got published, that really wasn't what I was thinking. And so I'd say something like, well, do you want to create some? You know, and it was almost like they thought, hey, this is going to be right out of the box, and they weren't developed yet. So there are some of these that I'm working on for a variety of different reasons. I will quickly share that I'm also proud of the fact that the not yet statistically significant data has been extremely positive. The success and retention are off the chart, and my administration loves to brag about that. My institutional research had to run the data twice because they didn't believe for an online course it was exceeding success for in-person classes. I attribute some of that to the fact that if the statistics are correct to say that somewhere around 50% of the students are not purchasing the text for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden you give everybody the access to learning material, to me that's a no-brainer. I would expect them to do better. Okay, even though it's a small study, it backs up a much larger study that's finding the same thing, more success and more retention. Okay, so what about royalties? And I'm close. Do I feel good about leaving money on the table? Absolutely not. There are moments still where I'm not sure if I have done the right thing. The sabbatical was paid full salary for one semester, and that was something that I felt like, hey, that's not nothing. That's something that is valuable. They were valuing my time and supporting my project. Grant funding. So I had an idea that some of those grants were going to be possible. I've been able to find multiple grants from a college state and a few others to be able to assist with various funding for the projects. I'm also indebted to people like Jeannie who volunteered to put together the glossary for the book. And sometimes I think if people know that you're not making a profit on it, then they're more willing to volunteer their time. So I don't know where to land on that one, but I'm appreciative that people have helped for that. There was an educational partnership for internationalizing curriculum fellowship at Stanford University that I was fortunate to be a part of. They were supportive of being able to sponsor a cultural competency chapter that just got added into the text. And then what was unbeknownst to me from the beginning, but has been a really nice thing that has come my way because of some of the experience and expertise, is consulting and speaking opportunities. And I would say honestly that part has more than made up for lost royalties for what I would have expected to earn with a traditional contract if I would have went with one of those early offers. So is that something, the consulting and speaking, that I think if you decide to go OER, that's going to roll your way? I think that part is probably unique to some of the things that I've been able to be involved with. But I would say also keep your eyes open. And then some career opportunities have also landed my way. I was offered a faculty OER director position at a 4-year university that was really because of some of the work that I've done here. So does OER have challenges? No question. Quality control, sustainability, maintenance, accessibility, print options, plagiarism, permissions, cost of photos, images, graphs. The online homework system in ancillaries, again, if I was trying to give a new author advice, whether they were interested in going OER or not, I would advise them to spend a lot of time surveying what the climate is for online homework systems and ancillaries and where we're going in the future. And then I can't make the point with more emphasis. OER is really discipline specific. If you happen to be in a discipline where color is necessary for your book, for your students, if color is going to affect the learning experience, you know, I don't want to say you're a little safer for anyone that feels like OER is a threat, but it's more valuable to you if permissions or images or graphs or color are absolutely necessary to get your point across. In my particular discipline, it was relatively easy to go black and white and to have TED Talks and YouTube videos, and I didn't pay a dime for permissions to add, you know, fancy graphs or images. So the last slide, talk to me 10 years from now, because maybe I'm kicking myself and wishing I would have done something differently, but no, I don't have regret at the moment. Thank you for listening. The last takeaways, OER is increasing in awareness. Addressing textbook affordability and open licensing are really appealing to some instructors. Speaks to that perception of the textbook prices. My opinion, OER can coexist with traditional textbook publishing. I don't see OER replacing. I see it capturing small market share, but I don't see it replacing. Authors, you might want to consider publishing a work in the traditional way. You might also want to consider publishing with an open license. And I say that from the brand point of view. If you're writing a blog, if you're on social media, if you're doing a podcast, for all the same reasons, you might consider putting yourself out there with something open. And then I'm going to segue to Jeannie. And really the OER initiatives are often central to the library. So to have a librarian speak about OER is apropos.
Got it. I think I got it. Thank you. So I'm just going to take a few moments to talk about the kind of support that libraries are supporting, and then also there's a lot of people involved with supporting OER outside of librarians, of course. So I'm just speaking from, I am a librarian, so just speaking from that kind of experience. But we are seeing more support for OER growing, and that is both at individual institutions and then also at the state level. So some of you in some of your states, you may have heard that there is legislation being passed to support open educational resources, and that can be varied across different states. So some states are really far ahead in kind of building programs around faculty using open textbooks, potentially publishing them, remixing them, and that type of thing. And some of that comes from the support at the state level or at their institution. Just to give a couple examples, Open Oregon has an established program that's really impressive. We also have a lot of research coming out because this OERs are really new, which also, you know, there's questions about the quality and sustainability, and some of these more robust programs, we can see research coming out of it as to where are the issues, where can we address some of the problems. Also, Affordable Learning Georgia is another one that has a pretty robust program. So support comes from, you know, librarians, also faculty who have published OER or are using OER. They are excellent mentors, as Dave mentioned, to others that are interested in it. Also, Center for Teaching and Learning communities are also kind of getting involved, and instructional designers as well. So just to give a couple minutes of what at libraries we are seeing, and sort of speaking from North Carolina, the kind of support that we're offering for faculty. A lot of questions come up about it takes time to both adopt a textbook and then also to adapt it or remix it. And that is definitely something that we understand. So there are a lot of stipend programs or grant programs that are out there, both on either the institution level or also the state level. And that can be for just OER adoption. It could also be potentially for OER publishing. So at our institution, we offer a $1,000 stipend to faculty to use free materials. So that could be library materials that we already subscribed for, or it could be using an open educational resource. So we have some flexibility there. But faculty can take that, we give it to their department, they can use it for professional development, travel, kind of any way that they would like to. Some other schools, I saw Boise State University recently. Their program kind of varies, so it goes from $500 to $5,000, depending on the kind of work that you're doing. So if you're going to adopt an open textbook, it might be $500. If you're looking at creating materials, that would be the upward of the $5,000 that you'd be getting. I will say librarians love to find stuff. That's what we specialize in, so identifying OERs is definitely something that we can help with. Identifying those popular repositories that are out there, as well as finding, if they're not in repositories, finding them where else they may live. And then for ancillary materials, that's also coming into kind of finding resources. We can help with that. There are some places where some of those materials are available. There's also potentially tools and software that can be used to help create those and add those to your learning software management system. And then we also help faculty with the tools and software to both adopt OER, also to create materials. So Pressbooks is something that we help faculty with using, and other types of software that might come along in that publishing or adapting area. And so the last thing that we just wanted to show you was there are tons of resources for open educational resources, both in either adoption or in publishing. This is by no means extensive, but I just kind of wanted to give a few examples in a few areas. Repositories, there are some, OER Commons is one that has a lot of information in it. So it will have everything from textbooks to full open courses, from MIT OpenCourseWare to videos to images, which can be extremely overwhelming, I will say that. So if you're not quite ready to take that dive into all kinds of materials, Open Textbook Library is probably where I would recommend getting started. That one is only open textbooks. So they have some criteria that goes along with that. So the materials that are going into it, you know, are full textbooks. Institutions are using them or they've published them. So that is a really great place to start. They also have reviews in there, so you can see what other faculty either who have adopted it, their kind of feelings about it as far as how is the content, how is accessibility, is the information correct, that type of thing. There are a lot of open guides, so of course, on open educational resources, both in adopting and publishing. I just sampled 2 up here that you could take a look at that can help you through going through the process, maybe identifying collaborators or partners to work on with that. And then finally, the OER communities are really supportive and really want to kind of grow it, as well as support sustainability, kind of addressing some of the issues that we talked about. Rebus community, as Dave mentioned, is really fantastic as far as helping you publish, finding collaborators, volunteering to try something new. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in exploring maybe seeing what textbooks are coming out, that is a great place to look. And then there's 2 listservs. There's a Spark Libraries and OER Forum listserv. It tends to be more library heavy, but it is open that you can join it, and there's lots of questions related to everything you can think of about OER. And then finally, the Community College Consortium also has a listserv that you can join if you want. Okay, well, I'm going to finish up, and we're going to open it up for questions. We have about 5 minutes left, so if you have any questions.
So, Dave, going back to the slide that you showed of your copyright page, I noticed at the very bottom of that there was some really interesting wording about how that could and could not be used. Yeah, you may not apply legal terms or technological measures that legally restrict others from doing anything the license permits. Now, you know, you and I had talked about some of these sites where they put up a paywall or where they're charging students to use the platform, but the stuff on the platform is free. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks for your question. So I feel like I should be an expert on that, and the truth is that I'm not. I'm going to invite Danielle and Derek if you want to chime in. So my inkling is that this is applying to the non-commercial technical piece of the license that is not included in the Creative Commons by attributions. So it would be difficult for someone to do something with this that they weren't supposed to. Again, other than not giving attribution. Correct. And I really thought about that, and in the beginning, I thought, if I'm putting time and energy and work into something, I don't want somebody else to take it and go sell it. And the logic then was to use the non-commercial. But when I really researched it, the non-commercial license was so problematic for a variety of other reasons, again, with combining licenses together. What I didn't want to have, because my project was a remix, was to have some of the content licensed one way and some of the content licensed another way. And that's partially because the next downstream user would run into complications with trying to license things. So one thing that happened because of that is that I identified content that had a different license that might be share alike or non-commercial, and I didn't end up using it because it wasn't going to fit with this universal, consistent license. I don't know if that answers your question, but either of you want to chime in? Sorry, Jen.
No, I think you covered it great, and essentially what it just means is you can't then take that open resource and deliberately make it difficult for people to access. So that's really what that technical requirement is. But I will say, disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, so but that's my understanding. Having gone through Creative Commons training, it's just about not making it more difficult for people to access or for making it seem like that content isn't openly licensed.
So my follow-up to that is, if you're not restricting commercial use, then one assumes that it wouldn't be inappropriate. If I think your work would be great in aggregation with something else, I can gather that together, as long as I'm not getting in the way of the place where you're delivering it from, right? And saying you can't get to it there. If I take a copy of it and put it with my aggregation, I can still put a paywall up. Is that your understanding? Since you're not restricting commercial use, whereas that would be illegal if you had the NC license, right?
Correct.
So I'll add just a quick follow-up to that. So for libraries, we do subscribe to materials that have Creative Commons licensed work in it, such as like TED Talks and that type of thing. But part of what we're paying for is not those items. So that's not included in what we're paying for. It's just sort of sitting on the platform. That.
And
I have a question for Jane. I have a question for Jean. As a librarian, do you worry about the quality of OER textbooks that are not written by Dave Dillon?
That's a great question.
I appreciate that question more than you know, Stephen.
There are some rubrics and stuff for evaluating OER quality. We leave that up to the faculty member as a subject expert. So to determine, is that material actually appropriate for the class? So we kind of, I guess, give that back to the faculty member to determine.
There are some OER repositories that do require a peer review in order to have the work be in their library. So it's a good question.
So I'm afraid we're out of time, but if you guys can hang around for just a few more minutes, maybe you can approach them if you have further questions. It's a very interesting session. Let's give David.
Thank you very much.